why don't you tell us what we need to know about Unicorn?
Sure. It's a story about a young girl who lost her mother in a tragic accident in rural Pennsylvania, uh, who discovers that she was left a horse by her mother. 5 years have elapsed, and a lawyer shows up on their door and says, "You have inherited this horse," and this is a young girl who has clung to her mother and the loss of her mother very powerfully, and her dad has been mourning the loss of the mother very differently. And when she develops, one day she realizes that the horse has a bump on its head beneath its protective fly bonnet. She comes to believe that it's a potentially more than just a horse, and essentially the forces of the world descend on this farm, and she has to collaborate with both her friends and her father to rescue this horse Percy from people that would do him harm.
What do you think, Don? Pretty good summary. Anything we need to add?
I'll give him a B- on that one. No,
A B minus. Right.
No, he did good. I think the one thing to stress is that the only thing I think he left out is that the horse is also kind of mourning the loss of the mother, and is sort of been contained in a stable because it's considered too dangerous for anyone to get near. And she finally gets near it, and that's when she discovers the bump on its head and thinks that it's a unicorn. And her dad, of course, thinks she's crazy, and the horse is just mean and old, and that sort of kicks off the story.
So I want to know more about your process working together. I know that both of you were inspired somehow in some way to deal with this story about the loss of a parent by dealing with your own loss. So Joshua, how did the two of you come together? How did the ball get rolling on this?
Yeah, I mean, it unfolded in a couple of legs or waves, but Don had actually had the idea for the story originally just from a trip that he had to a farm with his daughter, I believe, actually in rural Pennsylvania. And he shared the idea with me, and we actually kicked it around for a good long while, for probably almost a year, but it didn't really have a heart or a pulse yet. It was still very much kind of in the shadow of the mythology that we had erected for the source, and we were just still, it was very, very kind of undercooked in a thematic and emotional way. And then unfortunately, we both ended up losing. Don lost his wife lost a parent, and my wife lost a parent, and suddenly our children were dealing with that simultaneously, these relatively young children. And Don and I are friends, and so we're talking about stuff all the time, and it became clear somewhat quickly that actually was the heart that Unikorn kind of needed, and it was a way to talk about loss, and the loss of a parent very specifically, in a way that we felt that we as children, or our children, could wrap their heads around.
Do you guys have a lot of these types of ideas floating around between you? Lots of potential graphic novel, movie things that eventually could happen?
Yeah, I think we're always kind of exploring different concepts and ideas, and you'll have them in your head for, as Stephen King likes to say, the boys in the basement will kind of work on them for a while, and then you kind of you have it there. You haven't quite, you have the kindling, you just don't have the spark maybe yet, or you have the spark but not the kindling, and you're waiting for that thing to happen. And sometimes it's logistic, it's schedule and timing, and what are you doing, and what else is on your plate, and sometimes it's life. And in this case, I think what also kind of, if you have an engine, it's air, fuel, and spark. And I think we had the concept that was kind of there, and then this sort of fuel, this sort of the air was sort of this theme. But then I think the spark was also just us as parents. It's like that whole thing of not just dealing with emotions yourself, but trying to explain emotions to kids, and complicated things like loss and death, and in a way that's not so sort of fantasy Pollyanna, but at the same time not super dark. And some of this kid stuff that dealt with loss, it's so dark that I don't want to watch it. I don't think my kids want to see it either. So we wanted to do something that was a little more grounded emotionally, but also just a little more hopeful, a little more kind of a little more fun in ways. And that was our kind of hope in creating this.